All right, well, hey, here we go. Another wild and woolly episode of the Listening Porch. I love the way we get to do this now. You know, we're sort of taking a sweep or two or a few through the book, 107 Things. We won't always just stick to that formula because this is not a formula, it's a chat on the porch. But what we're going to continue to do is look around in this book that is born out of frustration. I live a frustrated life. And the reason is because so many times when I was traveling, I would leave always getting on an airplane saying, man, I wish I'd have said such and such. I wish I'd have done it. I should have told them this and I should have told them that. And it happens now. Anytime we do one of these things, I always leave with the same aggravation, even more sometimes than frustration. But so the book is called 107 Things I Forgot to Say the last time I talked about worship, creativity, and music. And so I guess it's a book of footnotes. And but the reason I put them all in one book is for people to be able to find and seek out their own answers and their own processes as they read these 107 things I forgot to say. It's a partnering journal. So you can, whichever one you read, then you process it. Maybe you could dig around and in your own readings and writings and find the answers that you're looking for. And then on the left side of the page, you have the space there to chronicle or journal your thoughts. The one you sent me today, Eric, is listening to music is an important part of the journey of life. There is something missing in your life if most of the music you hear is recorded. So you see there's a contradiction in what I said, an intentional contradiction. Listening to music is an important part of your journey of life, but there's something missing if your life is most... Why don't you read it?
But there's something missing in your life if most of the music you hear is recorded.
It must be Monday.
Yeah.
But it's true. How often do we find ourselves confined to listening to other people's expression and marrying those ideas into our own emotions and into our own life experience? And it's an important part of life is to be able to do that. Mm-hmm. But there really is something missing if that's the only time we access music. Yeah. And so from that, before you came over, I sat out on the porch and kind of accessed a few thoughts, and some of them from former teachings. Some of these I'll even try to point out if that'll help, that you can find in some of the other teachings that are in the bundle. But the reason we wound up, I think, with having this conflict in our own hearts, what is my song and what is me hearing that song and applying it to my life, which again is a wonderful thing to do. But there's an evolution of music that gets overlooked, I think. It's a revolutionary thing that happened when radio came along, for example. Mm-hmm. Now, the definition of a revolution is it destroys the perfect and enables the impossible and welcomes the new. Think about that as a definition of revolution. And when it welcomes the new, of course, if you look at music from a biblical perspective, when you hear the word new song, kodash, to rebuild, renew, restore, repair, there's something about recircling that revolution. Going back to original purposes of music is really what I think of it as. So when we hear a new sound, a new song, our lives evolve around days, seasons, and such, and then all of a sudden something revolutionary will happen, and it seems to set humanity, individually as well as humankind, on a whole different trajectory. Mm-hmm. And the music business is a perfect example of what we're talking about here, because before there was a music business, there was song, there was poetry. There was beauty processed and accessed in creation and finding the words and the images and the sounds that best depicted the world we lived in. Now, but the music business then came, and we're going to talk about that, listening to music versus being a song or being a sound. Mm. The music business actually had become perfect, and there were radio record chains, Rolling Stone magazines, and all of these things. The senior prom. But there's one thing about this perfect industry. There was limited access to recording studios. So there was a control and confinement. Record companies did it all. The replaceable nature of the LP also created an ongoing perpetuation of market. And it all added up to a business that seemed perfect and powerful. And it looked like something that could run forever and ever. And it just kept kind of evolving until all of a sudden something revolutionary began to happen. You know, because the music world was built on limited access. Common people, you know, Eric, you're a songwriter, but you couldn't just record music and put it out. That didn't exist. You could record music and carry it in your backpack or a box of albums, as we used to have, and wherever you go you could offer them if you were going. So the music industry was built on limited access. Common people would have to fight the war of dream and doubt. And you know, a lot of people just fell to disappointment, and their songs would die like them in obscurity. But then some would live out their passion and purpose and wind up in that parade of celebrity out there. But it wasn't easy to get there because it was limited access. You had to have a contract, had to have a music publisher, you had to have and not everyone's in the parade. And not everybody can be in the parade. Some have to stand on the wayside and wave as fame floats by. You know, then there was this big separation and songwriter, poets, those who had these dreams and music alive in them, they'd have to watch fame float by and sparkle and shine, and sometimes reawaken their dream only to find themselves caught in the cycle again of dream and doubt. But evolution evolves, but suddenly revolution came. See, evolution evolves until revolution creates a revolt and becomes revolutionary. And look at some of these revolutionary artists and musicians and you almost like these bohemian poets running around with all of this depth and wonder in their life, and maybe some boy just raised up out of a cotton patch in Arkansas with a song that shifted and created a revolution within the music. Or it may be, outlaw. It may be outlaw music that defied the industry, but carved out a place for itself because there was the common man was hearing the common poets step up and say something, and so this revolution would happen that would shift, But there's a huge revolution took place that was not always based upon what people were offering, but it could be based upon the technologies and the ability to get it out there. And I think that's kind of where we are now. We're still in the high winds of this technology revolution that where's this thing going to end? Yeah. But what it did was it destroyed the perfect business. And the perfect business was, as it was destroyed, enabling the impossible. Remember, the very first thing I wrote down there is a revolution. It destroys the perfect, enables the impossible, and welcomes the new. And that's what technology did. But that's no new thing, because music has always been connected to a technology that was defined by place. All music was written for place. All musicians. And I don't know if now it's on one of the teachings on the bundle. Now I have no idea where in all those hours and miles, but let's go back a few hundred years when there were troubadours and minstrels walking around with an instrument accompanying what they had to say.
Yeah.
But it would usually be a musician with a lute or a flute or a lyre or something, And that would be a very attractive, unique sound to capture attention, and then you could impose your poetry or your lyric or your drama. Mm-hmm. There was a lot of dramatists just would go from village to village, awakening this. It was a bit like a parade. The spectators would come out of hiding to hear somebody who could wax eloquent, and they were called many times troubadours, bards, mind singers, minstrels, whatever their name was. They were an important part of every culture. But typically they would be carrying an instrument or sound. But then they would some of them would find one another as kings and emperors would bring them into their world and entertain us, with your music. And there would be 2 or 3 of them maybe playing together. That would be a spectacle of entertainment. And then the music began to be being wrote for parlors and, chamber orchestras and stuff were born out of the idea of a band of musicians. Of course, we know that the first ones playing together, a band of musicians, this whole idea I'm talking about right now also goes back to biblical times. Right. Musicians coming down the hill playing. David, he established a whole guild of musicians and orchestra and divisions and responsibilities and all that. Mm-hmm. Why? Because the place changed. That band of prophets out there, they were school of prophets, band of prophets, company of prophets. They were sons of prophets. They were going around carrying these sounds and instrumentation that would awaken that spirit of prophecy upon the orator again. Yeah. But it was all around place and proximity. David changed that. Solomon changed it even more. Temple. But then by the time you get into the medieval periods, it's very limited to the roving musician. But then you start seeing it change again as you get on into the past medieval times. They started writing the music for big cathedrals and temples and synagogues and stuff. They started off with instruments like a vielle-leroux, a hurdy-gurdy, and sometimes a hurdy-gurdy would be as long as this table. They call them symphoniums or something. They had a crank on it. It would take 2 people to play it, but it was for this big cathedral.
Wow.
And the music itself was designed for place, because you're not going to take a Telecaster into a cathedral and make it make sense. You take or even the musical style had to match place. You couldn't play jazz today. You can't play jazz in a cathedral, not just because it's unacceptable, because it's unbearable. Because that room is built to sustain. So that's why you have long, beautiful notes, and then some of these ingenious revolutionaries would redefine music based around things like that, like Hildegard of Bingen, for example. What an amazing person. But she was kind of the beginnings of what we would know as plain song, one single note. No ornaments, all that. Then there would come a time where those moving notes would become a 1 and a 5, and Gregorian chant redefined again. All of this, as the evolving would come, the technology or the buildings would change, architecture would change, the music would have to change as well. And then you get, and I'm leaving a lot of stuff out here, but then they had to keep reinventing music, is my point. Mm-hmm. And then they would reinvent it on into the 1800s. And during the days of slavery, a banjo coming, an African instrument, and the guitar, coming out of Spain, and then you have the styles that would be indigenous to these subcultures. They would all begin to speak there, bring a new sound, and it would create these revolutionary ideas about music. And it's not always confined to place the way we might think. It's confined. It would be expressions of indigenous people that had been confined in places for somewhere in the world. In Ireland, it's been identified that 7 different fiddle styles in Ireland alone, or accents, we'll say.
Yeah.
Scottish fiddle accent is a different accent than Irish fiddling accent. And if you are sensitive and aware to those, you can kind of hear place in that. In the same way that you can hear place in song. Well, if you begin to sing, you can hear the place based upon the influence of the culture that you come from. But that evolutionary idea, and then bang, something changes it all. And it was used, and strangely enough, like when you hear in the Civil War days, it would be maybe fiddle, it would be a banjo, it would be drums, it would be different instruments, and they were for the battlefield, and marching. So it's bringing the sound to the activity or the action. And then after that, we've got the great composers and how it plays into it, which is beautiful. Haydn and Handel and all those, walking in the cool of the evening and writing symphony based upon creation.
Yeah.
And then it comes out of, but prior to that was the Baroque, and now it's coming to the Romantic era and of course, Haydn gave us 103 symphonies because he didn't have a chamber orchestra. He felt the bigness of creation, and he wrote accordingly and created the first symphony. And then went on to write 103 of them. So you see, again, writing for place. Now you got to have a place for not a violin and a viola or a cello or whatever, and a harp. You got to have a place for 24 violins instead of, or 12 violins and 8 cellos, and so it was the bigness. He basically took instruments and built a choir out of them.
It's a natural amplifier. Just add more of them.
Yeah, just keep building, and it would reach 115 dBs.
Yeah,
with this explosive sound, and imagine the impact. Well, no wonder all of society and all of culture would want to be in the presence of that. Even to the point that all over Europe, if you graduated from school, you graduated from your training, you would go on what's called a grand tour. So a student, your little girls, when they get to the age that they're ready to go on grand tour, they would go to all these places where these great composers would be basically salaried to write music of the estate and write the sounds of the land. And you'd get to go experience that. Wouldn't that have been something to, go to Esterhazy and hear the
sound of...
just hear the writings fresh out of the heart, as they would. Those are revolutionary ideas and concepts. And then, all right, let's hurry along here, and we get to the turn of the century. Technology again, we got all of the immigration and bringing all their sounds and songs to our land. And then technology began to speak into it. And by 1919, one of the most important instruments would be known. It was already known prior to that, but I think it was 1919, Woodrow Wilson addressed the League of Nations. It was before there was a United Nations. The League of Nations, he addressed them with this strange thing called a microphone. What? The world changed. Revolutionary idea to be able to project. So now music out of the hills and hollers had a whole new possibilities, because now you could sing into a microphone, and then this thing comes along called, based upon Marconi and Stubblefield and Edison, and some of those folks were creating these inventive kind of ideas, technology begins to grow, and then you got this thing called a radio happens. And and then these song catchers would go into these little hidden pockets of culture over in the Appalachian Mountains. And I think we talked about this at another time, but they would walk up and say, "What's your favorite song?" Up at some mountain porch, some old hillbilly that with a dulcimer on their lap or a banjo on their knee. And they would find these people and ask them to sing. And they had this a machine that they had to push around the wheelbarrow called a Presto recording machine. And they would set this thing down with these weird microphones, and this person would play or sing into it. And then again, a new revolution, because now you had a different way of the music leaving your porch, different way of the music coming out of your life. But that's also one of the harsh realities of that is many people would aspire now to be in that world, but many people would just back off because I'm not going to sing anymore. I'll just go buy singing. I'll just go buy music. I'll just go. That's where I'll get my emotive fix, and and my life will make sense based upon what the poets and the singers and so on are saying. And we lose our song. And look how the music changed also. It changed because now it became for place. Now, where's the music heard now? Well, it's heard around a microphone. And so you bring the entire group, the entire family of musicians that used to play on the porch and rattle the squirrels out of the tree or sing with the birds, are now singing into a microphone, and that's being projected. And now we have celebrity and stars, and all of a sudden we have music industry and music business. And so everything begins to be, again, focused. The very earliest days, you can look at the old pictures, earliest days of the Grand Ole Opry, for example, were those that came from the porch, whether it be Arkansas or Appalachia or Eastern Kentucky or whatever. Wherever they came from, that was now a goal, is to make their way to that world. And that's where it began to be not only explosive, but inaccessible. And that's why I say, man, it's a great, I mean, what we're talking about here, number 45. Listening to music is an important journey of the part of the journey of life, but there's something missing in your life if most of the music you hear is recorded. Now, what I'm implying there is go listen to live music, but also don't lose the music that's in your life. Find ways of expressing your praise. Find ways of expressing your worship. Find ways of expressing your life through song, through little ditties that you might sing to your children and your grandchildren, and through lyrics and poetry that carry the music of your life.